So a kafir is actually an ingrate. It's somebody who is not showing God gratitude by repaying the debt of consciousness. And the debt is the deen. It's the dain. It's the deen that you owe to God. So now he likes the word truth concealing for kufr. And she says, someone might object to the use of the word truth concealing by saying, I don't know these truths, nor do I accept that they are truths, so how can I be a truth concealer? Traditional Muslims would typically reply that such people have simply not understood what the Quran is saying. In other words, if they really understood it, they wouldn't reject it. But it's because they don't understand it. If they would pay more attention to the message, they'd actually say, well, all right, let's just, and this is an interesting exercise to do with anything. Let me look at this unbiasedly. Let me look at this without judging it. Because see, most people, if you ask most people about Islam, they assume that it's just wrong. They haven't studied it. That religion, no, that's just, they're this and they're that. No, it's no basis or foundation for that remark. So if I'm a Christian, I say, no, Christianity is right. Why? Because my mother told me. And my mother doesn't lie. Well, that's the same thing that the Sri Lankan Buddhist mother said that Buddha was the one he should call on, and mom doesn't lie. And the Muslim in Egypt, his mother said, Salli ala Nabi. Say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So she doesn't lie. So who's right? Most people have inherited their beliefs. They've never thought about them. They've never examined them. And that's why fanatics or extremists tend to be people whose belief is very shaky because they're actually so afraid of having it challenged that they're willing to kill anyone that challenges it. Which means that they don't really have a foundation for their belief. Because somebody who's deeply rooted in faith would never be afraid of sitting like Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, who sat in huge auditoriums and debated atheists. Because he wasn't afraid. He really believed that my faith and my understanding of it can stand up against anything that falsehood has in its arsenal. But if I don't have a strong faith, I'm very afraid of the arsenal of disbelief, that it might overwhelm me. So that is the way traditional Muslims would say that. Now, this is more a personal belief. This is not an Islamic belief. My personal belief is that the variables involved in judging anyone are so overwhelming and so complicated that it is best not to judge people. Just leave it to God. Because you haven't walked in their shoes, you didn't have their childhood, you don't know what was done to them. We don't know enough. And that's why people, their filters are often a result of the families they had, the societies they grew up in. And delusional states are types of madness. And delusion is it's a sign, it's a symptom of madness. Junun, to be in a delusional state, to be deluded. So even though the outward, we're commanded to judge certain things by the outward, and we should always do that in this world, the best thing to do is just reserve judgment for the next world in those ultimate things. Because Allah says in many verses in the Quran, you will return to Him and He'll explain to you all these things about which you were differing. يُنْبِئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَرِفُونَ فِيهِ تَخْتَرِفُونَ. He will tell you, He'll inform you. So people should just have some patience. Things will be made clear. And you don't know where people are in their evolution. There's people, an example of Michael Wolff. Michael Wolff is a person who told me, and he said it, the reason I'm telling you is because he said it on a television program. He thought about becoming a Muslim for 20 years. So, was he a kafir for those 20 years? Because the thing is, ultimately he became Muslim. So where does he lie in the spectrum? It's a fuzzy logic question. At which point do you go from kufr into iman or vice versa? There's a fuzzy logic there because only a life in its totality can be judged. You can't judge anyone at any specific point in their life because you don't know what the total life is. And in the end of the day, if he dies saying Tawbah and Allah accepts that Tawbah, he could be the worst human being that ever lived. And that's success according to the Muslims. So you cannot judge people at any particular point in their life. You have to have the whole life. And only God can do that. So don't judge people. Unless it's somebody stole, you have to deal with that problem. That's a problem, and there's a judgment that goes with it. But even in that case, you can forgive them. If I own a store and somebody steals, I can say, أَجْعَلُكَ فِي حِلْ. It's yours. And the Prophet ﷺ said, يَرْحَمُ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَرْحَمُكُمْ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاءِ. مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That's sigha umum. Man is one of the uses for generalization in the Arabic language. Have mercy on anyone in the earth, on those in the earth. It doesn't just mean specific people. It's man fil ard. Have mercy or compassion with those in the earth, and the one in the heavens will have compassion on you. And this is what Thomas Jefferson said, when I looked at people, I demanded divine justice. But then I started looking at myself, and I began to beg for mercy. So that's a powerful statement. You look outside, you want justice. You start looking inside, you want mercy. And I'll tell you another thing, and people don't realize this. Every fault that you see out there, and this is from Raghib Risbahani, every fault that you see out there is a fault in you. It's a fault in you, either manifest or like fire in flint. In other words, had you lived that person's life, you might be doing the exact same thing that person's doing. So because you're human, and humans are susceptible to all things human, anyone you see out there with a fault is a fault in you, either manifest or hidden in you like fire in flint. In other words, the right cause can start the spark. And that is a way of looking at the world with compassion. You begin to actually look at human beings in a different light. Because you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what type of suffering they've had. The three principles. This deals with Tawheed because we're going into Tawheed. The foundation of Tawheed falls into three broad categories. The first is he calls it Tawheed. It's actually called Ilahiyat, which are the divinities. The second is called Nabu'at, or the things related to prophethood. And the last is called the Sam'iyat. He calls it Ma'ad, which is the same thing. Sam'iyat are the eschatological matters. Those things that relate to eschatology or what comes after we die. So you have theology, and then you have revelation, and then you have eschatology. Those are the three branches of Tawheed. Now, one of the things that's important here is God is the foundation, the beginning of everything Islamic, according to our belief. The angels are creatures nearest to God in cosmic hierarchy, and they play a central role in God's interrelationship with human beings. So they're intermediaries. The measuring out, which is the qadar, both its good and its evil, refer to how God interacts with creation. To each thing, God measured out a certain limited amount of good, and as the negative consequence of exactly the same act, a certain amount of evil. So everything because everything's created in pairs. Because only Allah is without pair. And this world is an admixture of good and evil, light and darkness. The whole world is shade. There's no pure light in the world. The only reason you can see right now is because there's a mixture of light and the absence of light. If it was pure light, you would be blind. And if it was pure darkness, you would be blind. So the whole world is a mixture of light and darkness. Now what Allah is telling us is He created this world to take you from darknesses into light. So the process of being in the world is a process of moving through shades. It's a process of coming from darkness into the light. But that is a process. He's taking you out of darknesses. So there's these different degrees of darknesses to the one light, which is the light of guidance. And this is an evolution. So human beings, if they're on a spiritual path, are evolving. Things are becoming clearer because more light is coming in. More light is being introduced into the darkness of the material world. So this is the penetration of the spiritual realm into the material realm. And this is what revelation in essence is. It's the movement from the unseen into the seen. From that pure light, it's light moving into the darkness of the material world. Because the material world is, in a sense, not pure otherness, but because it's other than God, because it's corruptible, because it has elements that are susceptible to corruption. The degree that those elements exist in the world is the degree of darkness in the world, because it's other than God. The elements in the world of light relate to the fact that the creation is an act of God. So, Tawheed, the first is the Shahada. The first Shahada expresses Tawheed, while the second speaks of prophecy. Now, this is, I think, very, very important insight for all of us to understand here. So I just want to... If you look at the Shahada, it's La ilaha illallah. Now, just the way that this is said is significant. There's 3 letters here in the whole Shahada. That's all. There's just 3 letters. The Alif, Hamza, Lam, and Ha, which means Ilah, God. And this is the definition of Ilah. So within the Shahada... Now, another thing about Shahada is if you actually say it, La ilaha illallah, it's the same thing. It's just moving the tongue up and down. Now, what that is contraction, expansion. Contraction, La, expansion. La ilaha illallah. It's contraction, expansion. That is related to the 2 aspects of the Shahada, which is negation, nafi, and ithbat. You have negation, which precedes affirmation. In other words, you have to negate before you can affirm. So when you say, in Arabic, when you negate, you say la. And in Arabic, when you affirm, you say ajal. La is the negation, a is the affirmation. That's why the Arab, they say now, aywa, aywallahi, aywallahi, That's how you affirm something. When you negate, you say la. And that's why the first thing a child learns really in most cultures is negation. La. Because it hears it, obviously. Don't do that. No. So it learns quick. That's a powerful thing. They realize it's powerful. Because negation is very powerful. But more powerful than negation is affirmation. Affirmation wipes out negation. So what happens is you begin by negating and you end by affirming. You begin by saying La ilaha. That's the beginning of Tawheed, negation. La ilaha, there's no God. What does that mean? There is no God worthy of worship. La ilaha. In other words, there is nothing worthy of worship in reality. And that's why the Arabs say this is La ma'budun siwallahi, La ma'bud siwallah, bihaqqin siwallah. There is nothing worshipped in truth other than God. That's what it means. There is nothing worshipped in truth other than God. Nothing. And that's why when you say La ilaha illallah, you're saying there is no God in reality except the one true God. You're also saying that there is nothing that I should devote myself to except God. There's nothing I should be devoted to in truth, bihaqqin, in truth, except God. No money. Money's not God. Fame is not God. Fortune's not God. Beauty is not God. Material world is not God. Nothing is worthy of worship except illallah. There's your affirmation. Except the true God, Allah. That is the essence of Tawheed. And then Because that is not self-evident in reality. You need to understand it through a medium. Because self-evident truths are not truths that are simply obvious. They're truths that are obvious upon reflection. And that's why, if you look in the Declaration of Independence, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's not something that's obvious to everybody. But if you begin to reflect on it, it is a self-evident truth. It doesn't need to be proved from outside of itself. So, what we mean by God's existence is self-evident does not necessarily mean that everybody's going to get that there's only one God. In fact, most cultures fall very quickly into polytheism because it's very easy to actually think there's more than one God. And that's why the Brahman actually believe that most people are too stupid to understand divine unity. Even though the highest varna or class in Hinduism believes in one God. They don't believe in idols. But what they say is that the people in the lower classes don't have the intellect to grasp this truth. And so we need to give them forms that they can hold on to. The same is true in other religions that have icons and they need objects of worship because it's difficult to worship the abstract. Outside of the Muslims, the Jews are unique because Christianity quickly moved in to worshiping forms, and icons became objects of worship. In Judaism, there is no form for God, and that's why the holiest of holies was an empty room. When the Roman emperor, when they conquered Jerusalem, when he actually went into the Holy of Holies, he thought he was going to find all these idols. It was an empty room, like the Kaaba. And it was just like, what do they worship? Well, that's exactly it. It's not in this world. So that's difficult for people. Abstractions are really difficult. And that's why Tawheed is a high thing. It's not a low thing. Even though it's very simple in the outward, La ilaha illallah, even children do it. Lala is one of the first things that most children can say. And lullaby comes from a Greek word lulen, which means soothing. And children feel very soothed by the sound la la la. And that's why lullabies originally had la 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 in them. And that's what la ilaha illallah is, very soothing. Some psychiatrist that was doing that study about just the soothing effects of people saying just the divine name. And it's true. And I met somebody that she was given the name. She didn't even know what it was. She was told to repeat La ilaha illallah over and over for depression, just like as a treatment. And she got cured of her depression, and she ended up becoming a Muslim, but she didn't even know. She told somebody that her psychiatrist gave her this amazing formula to say. He told her to do it in the morning, preferably before the sun came up, and then in the evening, before she went to sleep for about a half hour, and she would do that. And she said she started feeling better. And he said, what was it? And he said, that's the Muslim creed. That's a true story. She died, rahimahullah. But I met her in England. She was an English lady from Liverpool. So when we go into Tawheed, understanding God. Now, one of the things that they point out that I think is very important is there are some Muslims that believe that God is something else, and there are also non-Muslims that think Allah is something else. So, and I saw a Christian and a Muslim having a dialogue, and the Christian said, I just have to say that I don't believe in the God you believe in. And what he meant, because if you read certain Christian literature about Islam, they will say that Muslims believe in another God, like the moon god or whatever god. And there are Muslims that think that the Christians, because they believe in the Trinity, that they believe in another God. Now, the point that the Quran makes when it says, "Ta'alu ila kalimatin sawa'an baynana wa baynakum," let's look at what we agree upon before we discuss anything else, that we only worship one God. The understanding there is that if we're talking about, are we talking about the creator of the heavens and the earth? Yes. then we're talking about the same God. What we're differing on is the particulars. The universal we agree on, but we begin to differ when we look at what is our concept of that God. Because Christians believe God is one. They don't believe God is three. They really don't. They do not believe God is three. They believe He's one. But He's tripart in this mystical, mysterious way. And they'll never explain it. So they believe in one God. They're not idolaters like that. They believe in one God. And the Jews definitely believe in one God. But within Judaism, there's some anthropomorphism as well. But even within certain Muslim sects, you get anthropomorphism, where you begin to describe God like a human having hands and feet and limbs and things like that, which is haram to do that. You can't do that. I mean, one of the things Imam al-Ghazali says, that the word in Arabic for hand has 17 meanings. Yet, he said, now which one are you going to choose that God meant when he said Yadullah? In other words, don't interpret it. Just leave it the way it is. But we know it doesn't mean this. With absolute certainty, we know that when God says Yadullah, He is not talking about something like this. We know that. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's a universal. There's nothing like God. And therefore, it's not like this. Because if I said that, then I'm saying God's like His creation, which is impossible. So when we look at the word God in the Quran, Allah is used. Now the Orientalists say it's obvious this is from ilah. Well, that is not obvious to the Muslims. The Muslim theologians do not think that Allah is from ilah. And people say, but look, it's same letters and this and that. Well, it's like saying Arizona is from arid zona. Arid zone, dry area. Right? Well, it looks just like it. You're making up an etymology that's not there. So the Muslims prefer just to say Allahu A'lam, where Allah comes from, that word itself. Some say it's al-ilah, and then it got what they call the idgham, where you say Allah. But most of the ulama, including Imam Suyuti, say the word Allah does not come from any other word. It's ghair mushtaq. It's not derived from any. It is ism alam. That's what they call it. It's a proper name. Now, before we can understand really how we understand God, the important thing is how we don't understand God. And that's why he goes into this idea of shirk. But one of the things that he points out before that, and she points out, which is important, is the idea of ilah. In the Quran, ilah, which can have a plural, which is called alihat, gods and gods, as well as like goddesses and things. The word ilah is used sometimes positive and sometimes negative. It basically means the object of devotion or worship. And in the Quran, it says that there are those who take their own desires as gods beside Allah. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith that Imam Qurtubi relates, says, أَبْغَضُ إِلَهًا يُعْبَدُ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْهَوَىٰ. The thing that Allah hates, the idol that Allah hates more on the earth that is worshipped, is man's own desire. Which is very interesting because most people don't think of idolatry as being something inside of you. They see it as something outside. You have to have a stone or a wooden form or something, a cow, that you an object of worship. But the Quran says, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you not seen the one or have not considered the one who has taken as his God his own desires, his own caprice, his own whims? And that's very interesting because that is the thing that's the most difficult thing to remove. That's the real shirk that becomes difficult. Worshipping our opinions. Because we become assiduously devoted to them. We're not willing to give them up for anything. We'll even die for them. That's a God beside Allah. There are many idolaters amongst Muslims from that category. May Allah protect us from that. But many Muslims don't realize that they fall in that category. The Prophet ﷺ said, مُدْمِنَ الْخَمْرِ كَعَابِدِ وَثَنٍ. Somebody who's addicted to drugs is like a worshiper of an idol. Because you will do anything for your God. There are people that will kill for drugs. Literally kill for drugs. Money. People will kill for money. Their desire. It's just desire. It's not the object of desire. What is forcing somebody to steal? It's inside. It's not outside. The object is called causa occasionalis, if you want a good Latin word, in logic. It is the occasional cause. It's not the deep cause. The deep cause is desire, because another person sees the same object and they don't have any money and they might even want it, but they don't steal it. Why? Because they're in control of their desire. So when the object outside, it's only seen, the delusional state is, oh, well, I had to have it. That's what made me do it. No, it was inside from the beginning. That desire was there, and that was only an exciting cause. It's not the deep cause. The deep cause is tama. The deep cause is this covetousness for the things of the world. So shirk in the Arabic language means to share, to be a partner, to make someone share, and to give someone a partner, to associate someone with someone else. Sharik is literally, you can call hada shariki fi tijara. This is my partner in commerce. So you're sharing. Musharaka. If we share things, natasharik, we share the food, we share conversation, whatever.